retraining yourself in this world tends not to work. Like there's a tremendous amount of value in retraining, especially if you're stacking skills. And so if you're someone where you're amazing at sales and then you can learn Python and you can automate a bunch of the stuff, like that's incredible. But you've been in that sales for 20 years and now you want to go retrain yourself as a software developer and you want to compete against these other open source devs, good luck.
Hey, how's it going?
Hello, Hannah. I'm so happy to be here. How are you?
I'm doing well. Welcome. Please introduce yourself to our degree-free audience.
As you all will find out very soon, Hannah and I are very good buddies. So my name's Kenny DeGiglio. I'm the co-founder and CEO of a company called U.S. Employment Solutions, and it's a subsidiary of a company called Inflection Points. And I work with Anthony Pompliano. He's the other co-founder on this business. And really what I focus on is getting people their dream jobs and then training people to do a really good job at their job once they have their dream jobs. One of the primary things I focus on is a training program called Crypto Academy, which we'll talk a lot about. And it's a cohort-based training program. And our goal is to help people transition into the Bitcoin and crypto industry. That's what I love to do. And that's where I spend a large majority of my time.
So part of the reason we're having you on, and we'll get into this later, but folks, I have been a coach for the Crypto Academy for going on 3 years now, I think, almost.
We've been running the program for 3.5 years now. So in June, it's going to be 3.5 years, which you're in this world. I'm guessing some of your listeners are in this world. In Bitcoin time, 3.5 years is forever. It also feels like this. You joined us in November of 2021. So 2.5 years or so. Crazy.
Yeah. So we're going strong. And quite a few cohorts have come through since then. Some of our listeners have never heard of Bitcoin. They've never heard of crypto. So if you could define for them what Bitcoin is and then let them know what crypto is relative to Bitcoin, that would be amazing.
Bitcoin is a decentralized digital currency. That's the best way to think about it. What we talk a lot about in the program is there's a million different ways to think about Bitcoin. And there's a lot of these shortcuts or heuristics that people use because Bitcoin is, I think it's a once in a multi-century innovation. It's a really big idea and it's really difficult to understand. It kind of sits in this multidisciplinary area between cryptography and finance and computer science and game theory and all these things. But in its very simplest form, it's a decentralized digital currency. Some people think of it as digital property. I like to think of it when I'm introducing it to people of what makes gold valuable. Okay, Bitcoin's valuable for the same reasons, but it's 10 times better in most ways because it's digital and a lot of these types of things. Decentralized digital currency is a good place to start. Digital gold, digital property is a little bit more advanced. Crypto is a much wider net. The way I think of it is like squares and rectangles is the analogy that I like to make. There are some legitimate use cases for cryptocurrency. We have things like smart contracts and NFTs. And then there are lots of things that are either outright scams or scam-like. The world is really crazy and it's difficult to navigate at first. And that's a big piece of what we try to help people with. And so cryptocurrency is this wider net, many really innovative and genuinely useful use cases, and also a lot to look out for. So it's really important that you have someone that you trust that's kind of helping you navigate the space, because we've encountered so many people who they make one wrong turn and then they end up watching these YouTubers who some of them have 1 million subscribers and they're talking about just crazy stuff. It's an area where you need to be really careful. And the only way that we've found to make sure people don't make some big mistakes is to really understand this stuff from first principles for yourself. Because if you really understand these concepts from first principles, nobody can BS you. And there's going to be a lot of people that try.
This is a good thing to talk about too, because I think a lot of our listeners are interested in breaking into new and burgeoning industries. They're interested in getting new tech jobs. And that's why I wanted to have you on, because crypto and the Bitcoin industry by itself, what a lot of people are not realizing is, as you said, interdisciplinary, different industries all intersecting at the same point, but it's finance, it's technology, and it's the building of essentially a new internet also on Web3 applications, which is something I think a lot of people struggle to understand. Could you give us explain it like in 5 version of what Web3 would be relative to cryptocurrency and Bitcoin?
Yeah. So if you really think about the evolution of the internet, there's kind of Web 1, which was the very early days. Web 2 is kind of like the social web. So this is kind of what most of us have been using. Web 3 is kind of the future of the internet. Or that's what a lot of people think. One way to think about the difference between Web 1, Web 2, and Web 3 is Web 1 was read only. So you'd go on a website, it was pure HTML, it was almost like a PDF. And this is the way a lot of people conceptualized the internet in the early days. You had these newspaper companies, the publishers of newspapers, and they were like, oh my God, this internet thing's awesome. We're going to be able to upload our newspaper onto the internet. That's the way the internet was for a while. So you can think of it as like read only. Web 2 was read and write. Not only could you read, you can actually go and publish. And so this is where we had the advent of social media. Web 1 was very decentralized. In the early days, a lot of people ran their own email servers, and it actually was decentralized, which is weird because we've gotten so far away from that. Web 2, everything became highly concentrated into the kind of FAANG companies, and everyone's data, all of the servers, they're owned by these highly centralized companies. But we're able to publish ourselves. So TikTok is an interesting example. Facebook, Twitter, you have individuals that can actually put their ideas out on the web. Web 3 is now the idea of, okay, we have read, we have write, those are capabilities. What about if we can also own? What if these highly centralized organizations like Google didn't control our data? What if we controlled our own data? Or what if we had assets that were native to the internet? So a really good example is credit card payments have become so embedded into the internet. But if we're thinking about Web 1, nobody would ever dream. It would be the craziest idea to be like, hey, I just like put your credit card number into the website and they'll send you something. That's a big difference between Web 1 and Web 2. So now we're using credit cards primarily as the way to facilitate commerce on the internet. But what if we had digital internet native currency? That's kind of one of the ways that I look at Bitcoin. What if that was built into the web itself? You basically have the traditional financial institutions, you have the fintechs built on top of them, which they're using really old legacy infrastructure and basically putting a dress on it. What if everything was native to the internet? You have the ability to actually own and self-custody your own assets. It's a really big idea. It's this really wide web, and just like AI is a good example, or machine learning, it's like if a company puts AI or machine learning in their earnings report, everyone's like, oh my gosh, they're innovative. Crypto and Web3 is the same thing. People are able to just use these buzzwords. They kind of use this terminology and lingo that's like just outside the grasp of a regular person, and they can use it to make themselves seem really innovative. But there is a ton of innovation happening. And that's kind of the hard part is, how do you dissect people that are kind of just using terms, but it's really buzzwords and there's not much to it, to, oh my gosh, like these people are building something that I think could be world changing, can be truly innovative.
That was a really good explanation. And I think for those of you listening that have never heard of these things before, it's a really solid overview of what crypto, what Bitcoin is, and why it matters. Because anything that touches money is going to become more valuable, especially if part of it, and a large part of it, is technology based, which is why now there's an entire new industry here. There's an entirely new set of jobs. And what a lot of people think too is that, oh, wow, these things are so ethereal and the skill sets are so hard and I have to know all these things. And you've heard me say this to people. We're building the future with current technology. So we're building future technology with current technology, which is always true. That's true back to the pyramids, right? You built future technology with the current technology you have because you can't build with things that don't exist. And that is what the Crypto Academy is teaching. It's giving people going from, I don't really know what this is, or I'm kind of curious, to how do I get a handle on these concepts? And then how do I figure out what skills I need to learn? So who do you think would benefit the most from the Crypto Academy?
Yeah, this is a good question. I'll just very briefly introduce Anthony because that's kind of relevant to this. So for anyone who doesn't know, Anthony Pompliano, everyone calls him Pomp. He's one of the biggest investors, media personalities, podcasts, kind of you name it in the Bitcoin and crypto space. And so his podcast, the Pomp Podcast, is incredible. Hannah was on recently. Check that episode out because she absolutely crushed. So basically, he's someone who invests in companies and then talks to all of the smartest founders and developers and engineers across the space. It's him, and then we have an amazing team of people like Hannah who run this program. And it's just because I'm probably going to reference Pomp so people kind of knew who he is. So as Hannah knows, me, Pomp, and the rest of the team are obsessive about collecting data because that's the only way you can know for sure, are we getting better or not? And so as we'll talk about, the Crypto Academy, it's a cohort-based program. Actually, I had no idea what that word was. I didn't know it until we started doing this. I mean, I've heard the word, but I never went through my brain. So basically, the way we think of a cohort is we take a group of people, we put them all together, and these people have the same goals, ambitions, and they're generally very similar in terms of their core ideologies and the things that they care about. As you know, they're super different in terms of like anything you can point at, like that's that type of person. So we have men, women, old people, young people, people from the US, people from all over the world. So as part of these groups, we'll have like a 80-something-year-old guy from like rural Oklahoma, a 22-year-old young lady from like Kenya, and they're actually pretty similar. They're very similar in the way they view the world. They're very different in just about every other way. The way that we think of a cohort is just a group of people who we put together, and then they're on this journey together forever, basically. And we'll talk more about why. And so a group of people who are all on the same journey. And so we run this program via these cohorts. And so we've done 20 of them now. We just finished our 20th. We're starting our 21st in June. Pretty crazy. As you can imagine, when we started, we had no idea what we were doing, which is fine. Everyone needs to start somewhere. We had this inclination of people wanted to get jobs in the industry. People could use more connections, and then people wanted to learn more. Not necessarily learn more, but they wanted to really make like big step function increases in their understanding. Talk about like exactly what I mean by that. But besides that, we had no idea the identity of the program, how we would help people, and we figured it out on the fly. Collecting feedback has been so important for us in that process. We do our best, our hearts and souls in every group. We say, hey, you'll never offend us. Any idea that you have, like, we want to know, because that's the only way that we're going to get better. We collect a bunch of structured feedback. We get together as a team. We look at it and we're like, how can we make this thing better? We implement a few things. In the early days, we would make it worse a lot, and then we would go back to the drawing board, and now it's pretty refined. I say all this to say, like, we're very particular about the way we collect data about why people go through the program. And it's a weird one because people don't join for one reason. They join for a bunch of different reasons. And as you've seen, the reasons that people think they're joining, what they actually get out of it is usually completely different. That's part of the process. So when people finish, we ask them a question, and the way we word the question is kind of funny because it's a really hard question to word. And it's like, look, we know you went through the program for multiple reasons. What's the primary reason? And I think in like parentheses, say, gun to your head, if you have to pick one, what would be the one that stands out? Because everyone wants to go like all of them. Like the way the data works out is it's just under 50% of people, 2,600 people or so go through at this point. So it's just about 50% of people say their primary goal is, I want to transition into the industry. Now, what that means is like literally 100 different things. Some people, they're an accountant at one of the big four, and they're like at the manager level. They've been doing it for 10 years. They want to go and work a corporate accounting job at a Coinbase, like a big publicly traded company. Pretty straightforward. Other people want to start their own business, but they want like a lifestyle business. Other people want a legit VC-backed startup. And like I said, there's probably 100 of these different things. What transition into the industry means a bunch of things. And like part of what we do and part of where you really focus is helping people take something that's abstract. I think crypto is cool. I like to work in that industry. To be like, no, specifically, how do you want to leverage your current skill set to do something that's really valuable? So that's a part of the process. The second one is really interesting. It's gone up pretty much every cohort. It's this group of people, and we jokingly call them like my wife is going to divorce me if I don't shut up about Bitcoin people. But that's like the best way to describe them. And it's people who go like, listen, I got captured by this idea and I've become obsessed with it. And now it's like my primary hobby. Like I work, I do the stuff I need to do. I spend time with my family. But if I'm reading, if I'm listening to podcasts, it's Bitcoin stuff. I love it. And it's like a bug, right? That bites people. The problem that people have is they get to a point, they're like, all right, what am I doing with this information? I'm already fully allocated to this asset. Most people, it's their primary savings vehicle. And they go like, maybe I love my job or I own my own business or whatever. I'm just cramming this information in my mind and then that's it. 30 to 35%, like I said, it's gone up nonstop, of people are like, look, if I transition into the industry, great, not my primary focus. I know that I'll learn a ton. What I really want is I want to plug into a network of other people who are obsessed with this stuff because I know they're out there. I can see them online. But anytime I try to talk to someone about Bitcoin, they like laugh at me and like scoff at me. That's important. As you know, with the way that we've structured things, we've doubled and tripled and quadrupled down. How do we create a space for people to develop genuine friendships? And that's something that's really important in and of itself, but it's a weird thing to market. Like, yeah, you're going to make friends. It is very important. But all the stuff that's downstream of that is the highest leverage stuff. It's the best outcomes all, for the most part, start with like, hey, I just met this person and we really trust each other and they're super cool. And I'm finally able to discuss these really interesting and complex ideas. And then 10 or 15%, it's learn. Everyone learns, but it's usually folks who are very beginner focused where they're like, hey, I know that in a month, I could probably get the 20%, like kind of Pareto distribution stuff. I can probably get the 20% of information that's going to get me 80% of the way there. Can you help me with that? So that's really who goes through and why.
Something I think that's important to hit on too is for our audience, we kind of have a little bit of a distribution of both adults who are looking to transition from a completely unrelated or non-technical industry. So think nursing, teaching, even restaurant work, possibly working in an office that has nothing to do with Bitcoin, crypto, or tech of any kind other than using Microsoft Word and Teams on a daily
Google
basis.
Docs nowadays, everyone.
Yeah, exactly. And part of the reason that I wanted to have you on and talk about this was because one, and this is Garrett Graves from a few episodes. Well, it was probably about 20 episodes ago, but Garrett Graves was a young engineer who works at Twitch. Now he has a Y Combinator backed startup and he was on our podcast, but he said something really wise that I've never been able to quite shake, which was build new technology with in-demand technology. That is why I wanted to have you on to talk about this, because a lot of people see Bitcoin, they see crypto, they see the burgeoning fintech industry, and they see how that is going to be the future, because a lot of it too is now even interspersed with AI, because any new technology is always going to combine in order to get more VC money, which is why people tend to see. Then the next thing, we were joking about it at work the other day, but quantum is the next thing. So it's going to be quantum, crypto, AI, startup.
Yeah. Toss like identity in there for good measure, and you have like the holy trinity.
Identity-based, generative, quantum, AI, crypto startup. That's what we're going to do.
Buy
Guys,
my token.
When Kenny and I start a startup, that'll be it. That's going to be the name. It's real catchy. The acronym's going to kill too. It'll be like a mile long. The reason I wanted to have Kenny on to talk about this, folks, was because a lot of you are very intimidated by getting into new technology or trying to learn new stacks of skills that would allow you to get these types of jobs in these new industries in new tech. And it's also intimidating to just research how to do that for your young adult, so your 16 to 20-year-old. And that is why I wanted to have you on, Kenny, because for me, I still work in AI and machine learning, and I got that job from the skills that I learned in the Crypto Academy, because I had my initial story. A lot of listeners are familiar with me going from 28K to 100K with self-learning Salesforce and business analysis. But what they don't know is the other half, which is I went into the Crypto Academy and then I started working in AI. That is why I wanted to have you on, because there's a lot of people who are very intimidated and they think they have to have all this background knowledge. So my question to you would be, what do participants need any background knowledge before joining the Crypto Academy?
I would say when we're talking to people, does this thing make sense for me? Where most of them start is, listen, I'm actually really great at this thing. A lot of people who we work with are in the top 10, 20% at what they do. And I'm guessing a lot of your listeners, either themselves or they're young adult, their kids are starting to hyper focus on one thing, and you can get really awesome at something pretty quickly, right? And a lot of people who I chat with, they're like, listen, I've been in sales for 20 years. When it comes to B2B SaaS sales, like I'm as legit as they come. These are the deals I closed last year. And then they'll be like, I'm awesome, but I don't know anything about software engineering. I'm not technical. Where I'm stuck is like, where do I fit into this industry? Because who I see is all these shadowy super coders, I think was like Elizabeth Warren's thing. And so that's people's stereotypical conceptualization of who works in this industry. That's what we hear. And so the reality of it is, at this stage in the game, we're about halfway through 2024, which is nuts. The businesses that are being built in this industry are legit businesses that are solving real world problems. And because of that, they're producing lots of revenue, pretty profitable in many cases, or growing their user base like crazy. And they kind of have the thing of like, we know we have this VC spout. Let's focus on getting as many users, figure out profitability later. Both models work. And so at this stage in the game, they have an organization that's comprised of every single function you'd expect to see at any other kind of early to mid-stage tech company, or a lot of these companies almost look like traditional finance, like TradFi companies, almost like kind of neobank. As you probably know, and as I guess your listeners probably know, kind of in the startup world, the last functions that tend to get built out are HR, recruiting, learning and development. It's just easy to outsource these things. They're the lowest priority. I would say at least 30, 40, 50, maybe 60% of the businesses that we work in this industry now have even those functions. The way to think about it is, what's the most important prerequisite? Well, the most important prerequisite is that you are really good at something and you can use that skill set to add value. The best method is retraining yourself in this world tends not to work. Like there's a tremendous amount of value in retraining, especially if you're stacking skills. And so if you're someone where you're amazing at sales and then you can learn Python and you can automate a bunch of the stuff, like that's incredible. But you've been in that sales for 20 years and now you want to go retrain yourself as a software developer and you want to compete against these other open source devs, good luck.
Hey there, I hope that you're loving today's conversation. At Degree Free, we want to help as many people as we can thrive and succeed without needing a college degree. Having these guests on that share their experiences so that you can learn from their stories and their mistakes is one of the ways that we do that. Genuinely, I'm just grateful that these guests take the time to come on and share their wisdom. And if you're getting value out of this conversation, or you've listened to 2, 3, or 4+ episodes, I have one quick ask. Please take a moment right now to review this podcast on whatever platform you're tuning in on. With your review, you're not just supporting us, but you're amplifying the voices of every guest we bring on and ultimately helping more people thrive degree free. Thank you for doing that right now and for being such an important part of Degree Free.
No, not that you can't, not that you can't. To anyone listening, anything is possible, but we're just talking about leveraging what you do have, getting a sense of where in this industry you may have a place, especially because there's so many new companies, there's so much growth and it's so fast. That's why I want people to hear this because again, my story is I got in very early at a very small company that has grown since then. And that's where you just take an existing skill set, get some context, understand the business case, and know how you can help apply your skill set to a company in a totally different industry than the one you're in. And you just have to learn the basics so you can actually explain that to whoever is interviewing you when you get to the point that you're applying.
Yeah, and that's the thing is I'm sure that you deal with this across a bunch of your listeners and then people that you work with directly is we have people that go, these amazing people and their confidence is just shot. And they'll be like, I stink. Like, I don't have any skills. Okay, well, what have you done? Right? They'll be like a 30-year-old young lady or young guy. I worked in the restaurant industry for 5 years. I was in retail for 5 years before that. Okay, and you have no skills. Like, yeah, whatever. How about sales? How about customer service? How about, and the list goes on.
I just had a realtor who was running a business. She was pulling in about $400,000 to $500,000 a year, running social media, running marketing, running open houses. And she's like, I don't have any skills. What are you talking about right now? What do you mean by that?
Yeah.
But that's so many people have that problem. And it's trying to figure out how to catalog and realize. And what they mean, I think, Kenny, is that they don't know what skills translate. So they feel like they have none. They don't know where they're trying to go. They think they might, but they're not sure. And then they don't know how what they do have translates at all, if any of it does, to something else. And so for most people listening, your skills do translate. And that is true whether you're thinking of your 16 to 20-year-old who's working as a lifeguard or working part-time at a retirement home as a server. If you've been in HR or system administration for 20 years and you're now moving in, or sales for 20 years, it all translates. You just have to figure out how and what.
The only other thing I was going to say is, so prerequisites, we all have skills. One of the best I've ever seen at is drawing this out of people. And again, you see it with people who've entrepreneurs, so folks who have never been in like a traditional corporate hierarchy, they get this a lot. And I think you and I have both kind of figured out how to work with it, but it's like, what am I actually good at? I do all of these things and obviously it's working. I'm not on the street broke. To be successful, you need to figure out create a system for what are my skills? How do I apply them for max leverage? That's a prerequisite. And then there also is this thing of, if you're going to work in this industry, you need to understand the language. And you need to have the word, the vocabulary, like we say, what's the difference between Bitcoin and crypto? You have to have some understanding. And that's our goal, is to get people to that point where from a 360-degree view, they understand what's going on. And companies do care about that. A lot of the companies that we work with, that's why they love hiring people from us, is because they know that they're going to be at some level. And because all these companies, if you look at a company like Coinbase, they want to hire the best customer support people in the world. It's pretty well established. They have a system for that. What's a lot more difficult is, well, in order to be good at customer support at Coinbase, your crypto fluency needs to be at least at some basic level. And so that is a requirement. And it's a really hard problem for companies to solve. If you've already solved that problem for them, you do become way more attractive as a candidate.
You bring up something that I want to address too. So for those of you listening that don't know, Coinbase is an exchange. So basically it's a platform where you can buy and sell cryptocurrency.
Yeah, and one of the only at this stage publicly traded companies in the industry, which it makes it really appealing to a lot of folks. Stability, right? If you're someone with a family and kids and a mortgage, you've worked at an investment bank, say, your whole career, there is something associated with, hey, this is a publicly traded company. Like I understand this type of corporate structure.
Healthcare, 401k, all of that. It's not the hair on fire startup. But what I wanted to say was to hit on that vocabulary piece that you just talked about, because when I first got into tech, coming from a call center where I was one of those people, I said, I have no skills, I have nothing, right? I don't know anything. But obviously, I had some sales skills, which is why I was working in a call center. The key piece for me was learning the vocabulary. I made thousands of flashcards when I first got into tech. But the thing that I was missing that I gained later through work, but you can gain through the Crypto Academy if you want to go into this industry, is context. So I can look up and read and educate myself and I can know the words, but it really does help to have a group of other people who are asking dynamic questions, a group of coaches who know this industry, know the specifics of it, know the ins and outs, and can educate you and give you the full picture and the full map of this is what's going on. These are the things that are changing. This is how this works. So you can take your vocabulary and now you can have context. And that matters a lot for exactly what you're talking about, which is interviewing for jobs where you have to understand your place in this lineup.
Exactly. And just understanding the different value maps of different organizations and kind of subsectors of the industry. And so something that's really weird about Bitcoin and crypto, you know this better than anyone, is if you tell someone you're a lawyer, I'm an associate lawyer, you tell them what kind of lawyer you are, like they pretty much know exactly what you do. I'm an analyst at one of the bulge bracket investment banks. Okay, fine. I work 5 years into my career and I work in Bitcoin and crypto. That can mean a million different things. That's exactly one of the most important things about, okay, if someone decides they want to transition into this industry, what do you care about as an individual? And everyone cares about different things. Like what gets us really excited? Finding a company who the organization's mission is aligned with that. If you look at this world, a company that is focused exclusively on Bitcoin, they're going to have a much different kind of corporate kind of culture within the organization than some company that's focused on some problem in Web3 that's a little bit further out. The way that these cultures work is a lot different. It's nearly impossible to navigate this when you're brand new. These nuanced things where it's like there is no flashcard you can make. You start to get intuition over a certain amount of time. It is really helpful. You do see this in other industries, innovative industries like AI. Like there are certainly different cultures at these Gen AI companies, but it's even more pronounced in the Bitcoin and crypto world. Again, it's these kind of intangibles of like everything's so disorienting when you're first entering this world. I think that's something we help a lot of people out with, is just like kind of getting your bearings and understanding which way is up, which way is down.
Well, one of the questions I had was what can they expect to take away from the Crypto Academy? And I would say that that is exactly what they can take away from it. So my next question is, how does the Crypto Academy prepare students for a career in crypto or Bitcoin? And then can you share some examples of what former students are doing now, some stories, because I'm sure we'd love some of those.
Let's talk about like, how do we do it? I think is maybe the best place to start here. There's so many stories that like, we'll go into a bunch of them. And you have someone who's a management level accountant at a Big Four. It's like, well, what do you want to do next? Accounting. It's like, okay, there's a million accounting jobs open. So that's like pretty straightforward. It comes down to like, what's a good cultural fit? Where do you actually want to spend your time? Because there's this thing, and I'm curious if you see this with a lot of the folks that you work with, is people decide they want to make a change. That's the first step. And then they get really excited about it and they're eager to make the change right away. And they tend to take the first thing that comes across their plate, even if it's not over the long run the best fit for them. I think we see a lot of that. For someone that has a really transferable skill set like sales or accounting, most of what we focus on is how do we make sure you end up somewhere that either you can be for the next decade working on a problem that you care deeply about, or it's going to propel you to the next phase of your career. With folks that are coming from more obscure industries. We had a guy he was a funeral director his entire life, family business, and he's kind of looking for his next phase, final quarter, let's say, of his career. How do you pivot from funeral director? Kind of like a weird background. And so that was actually a bit more fun for us. We have folks who come in self-classified. Hey, I'm working a dead-end job. I'm working in insurance, and I'm going to sit in this poorly lit office for 30 years for the rest of my life, or I'm going to figure something out. I'm working in landscaping. They use that terminology. We don't. But if they don't see themselves progressing and having something on the career side that's satisfying, those are the best for us because there's so much. You can literally do anything. It's how do we figure this stuff out? So we can go into some of the stories. There's a bunch of amazing ones. In terms of how we actually cover the material, I guess the best analogy is drinking from a fire hose. That is what it's like. There's just so much information, and we've done a really good job of organizing it. And no matter what level you're in coming in, you get a lot out of it. Our philosophy is there's really three things that we care about that we always come back to if we're making decisions. The first is everything initially happens live. I want to talk a little bit more about that. The second is, unless something major changes in the world, it'll always be cohort-based. All of our best outcomes have come from the fact that you get to know this group of people really well. I'm in cohort, I think you were 8. I'm in cohort 12, and there's like this sense of pride, and that sticks with people. And then the third thing that we always come back to as a team, especially when making big decisions, is the program and everything surrounding it has to be designed. It must be. There's no exceptions. Designed for someone with all the stuff that we deal with as adults, right? Full-time job, kids, family stuff, all the stuff that we do that we all feel like we don't have enough time. Well, those folks should be able to manage the program on top of this. And so it's this weird trade-off of live, cohort-based. We have so much we want to cover. We know people can't be spending 40 hours a week on this. And so that's really like the line that we walk. Why is live so important to us? Well, live is so important to us because if you think about learning, all of us are way too good at the first half of the learning process, and we either completely ignore or severely neglect the second half. And so the first half of learning something new is you consume a bunch of information about it. My screen time doesn't look pretty. I'm sure yours doesn't. I'm sure most people. Mine is embarrassing. If I say like, hey, like, what does your iPhone say? Hours per day? It's a lot. It's a big number.
Dude, shots fired.
What I'm doing is like consuming information, right? I'm on Twitter. I'm listening to podcasts. I'm watching interviews on YouTube. I feel productive, right? But it actually isn't really that productive if that's where it stops. And most people stop there. What most of us think at is sitting down and writing our thoughts out and summarizing the key points of this is what my views are on what I'm repeating what podcaster X said. They said this and I agreed on this, but then I disagreed on this, or just having discussions about it. That's why it's so important to us is we spend hours in discussion groups and social events, which are fun. And we get to the relationship side's important, but having these discussions where you go, okay, there's a topic called Bitcoin mining. And I understood this and I understood this, but I got lost here. Can somebody help me? And guess what? You have all these people who know everything about Bitcoin mining, but they've actually never spoken about it. They've only consumed the information. They can't wait to explain Bitcoin mining to someone else. Or there's actually this interesting impact that Bitcoin mining has on the environment. And this is my opinion. And then someone will go, but what about this? And they'll have to answer. And they'll go, but have you ever thought about it this way? And they'll have to answer. And eventually you reach a certain point, they're like, okay, that's the limit of my understanding. I've now reached it and I now know where that is. This process of doing as much as possible to facilitate that second half of the learning loop is so important to us. And so that's why live is so important, and cohort-based goes alongside of that. You really get to know people if you spend 2 hours a week in a discussion with them, and then you understand how these people think. You get a feel for like, do I really like this person? Do I want to be their friend for a long time? And now, because we've been doing this for 3.5 years, we're starting to really see the fruits of a lot of this groundwork that's been laid with people who went through the program together 2.5 years ago, and now they're starting a business together.
I was about to bring that up. I feel like I've seen pretty much the whole spectrum in the community itself and afterwards is businesses, friendships, meetups, jobs. So many things come out of the network that you get when you go through this course because of the cohort nature of it.
Exactly. And I'm curious kind of the way that you guys usually have this discussions on the show and just in all the work that you do. The way that we think of it is you got to be confident. Like that's the first of all. Like you need to be able to do the job. And gosh, I mean, I'm sure most of your listeners, like especially the adults who are listening primarily for their kids, like this is an interesting thing of like the bar isn't very high in many cases. How many times a day, maybe even for some of us, do you encounter people and you're like, you really can't do like, that's like the basic thing that you're supposed to do in your role. You do need to be confident. And like the more confident you are, the easier success is going to be. You need to be likable. That's a huge piece. And then outside of that, it's like relationships are everything. At this stage in the game, if you look at all of the people who go through our program and you look at the people who get jobs, we keep really close track of this. I haven't looked at the number recently, but it's in the range of like 70 to 75% are not filled through cold applications. They're filled now at this point through relationships of you really get to know somebody. their organization or maybe the company they started is hiring and they go, I vouch for this person, get them in for an interview. Trust me, I know them very well. And so that's like really where we've doubled and tripled and quadrupled down. And what we see it, our job as, is are we creating a space where people can really get to know each other and they can lay like a solid foundation for relationships that they'll have for the next 5 years or the next decade and beyond? No networking, none of that. It's like, are these people developing genuine relationships? If yes, we've kind of done a good job on that front, because then the outcomes are stuff that we never could have forced or never could have predicted. People think of an idea for like a really innovative company. We, as our small team, we would have never thought about that. It is a network, experiences the benefits of network effects. We're kind of like letting that take its own life on, and like all the cool stuff happens from the network. And so anyway, that's why the cohort is so important to us, because people come in and they're like, okay, I'm going to learn a ton and I'm going to fix up my resume and I'm going to learn how to write a cover letter. And it's like, yeah, for sure, you'll do all that. And then like on the other side of it, they're like, oh my God, I never thought I would meet someone who's now in hindsight my best friend. And we started this podcast together and all these types of things. Those are the outcomes that I guess excite us the most, or that we are like, this is why we are doing this thing the way we're doing it.
And it's just putting people together, which is one of the most valuable things that you can do, because people need each other at the end of the day, which is why network is, as you said, so essential and such an overlooked massive benefit of doing something and being part of the academy. So that was one of the questions I was going to ask. So you already answered it.
What I'm doing right now, and this has worked really well, is we have the next group starting on June 10th. What I've been focused on is we shoot for about 100 to 115 people in a group. That's like the perfect size. It's small enough where everyone really gets to know each other. If you have an idea you want to contribute or a question, like you'll always have the opportunity to ask it. But then it's big enough where its conversation is never clunky. We always have like amazing organic conversations. So like too small, it's okay, what do you guys want to talk about next? At that size, we can stay on for hours on end and there's never even like a dull moment. We're shooting for about 100 people. And so what I've been doing is just having calls with anybody who's interested. And some people, this is just not the most logical next step in their journey. Like some people, they're looking for, I really want to get in on the investing side. There's other ways to do that. Or people who are like, I really want to learn a coding language like Solidity. We're not going to help with that. But for people that it's a good fit, I'm pretty good at like saying, hey, this is perfect for you. So what I've been doing is giving people who hop on those calls me a discount that brings it just down just below $1,000, which is like a really good price for kind of everything that we offer.
And then how long does it run too?
That's a good question. The core 3 weeks, which is what everyone focuses on when they're evaluating, like, is this thing good for me? Which makes sense. I would say probably 50 to 60% of like the total value that someone accrues from the program happens over those 3 weeks. That runs from June 10th all the way through the end of June. So it's 3 weeks long. Over those 3 weeks, we give people the option to attend like 25 hours per week worth of live sessions. And so that's like if someone sat down and they attended every single session, that's what it would kind of accumulate to. The median is right around 5 to 6 hours per week. There is this element of like, the more you put into it, there is diminishing returns, of course, but in general, the more you put into it, the more you'll get out of it. 5 to 6 hours a week really seems to be the sweet spot where people are getting kind of everything they hope. That's what I meant about like, if you have a full-time job, a family, kids, that is still manageable. And a lot of people will do it 1 hour a day over these 3 weeks. They'll make dinner, eat dinner, put their kids to bed, and then from X time to X time in the evening, like they can go in their office and kind of be left alone. Some people will do it like crazy, it's chaos, but they have 5 hours on like a Sunday and they kind of get caught up. There's a high degree of flexibility, but like 5 to 6 hours per week over those 3 weeks is kind of the expectation. But outside of that, we kind of view as like we have phase 1, phase 2 is those core 3 weeks, and then there's phase 3. So what we have going on right now is kind of like the ramp up period where every kind of enrollment's open on a rolling basis. People have been signing up, a couple people a day, every day for the past few weeks. So as people come in, we're hosting weekly social events through Zoom. And the goal here is let's get to know each other really well. That way, by the time that we start, this is a big one, is like the introverted folks, like nobody's afraid to ask questions. We all know each other. We developed the rapport. And so we like go in full speed. That's kind of happening now. We're doing like weekly social events. And then as we get closer, we'll ramp them up to bi-weekly. And it's like, no pressure. If you're busy at the time that we're doing it, we're going to do a bunch of them. But it's really cool to kind of allow people to get to know each other before we officially start. We've seen there's an incredible amount of power there. And then when someone quote unquote graduates, our goal is that they stay as active as possible in the alumni community. We have 2,600 people who are part of that community now. Some people, as you know, are in there all day, every day.
All day, every day.
That's what they're doing. Some people pop in every so often, but our goal is everyone stays involved to some extent. We do weekly alumni meetups every Wednesday, which those are a bunch of fun. And so we do in-person meetups. We do at least one of those a year. Our goal is like you go through the core 3 weeks, but then it's like ongoing of how can I help the other people in the community? How do I help the new people if I'm someone who's been successful, which has been a key kind of element to our success. That's kind of the way we think about it, encourage people to think about it is, yeah, the 3 weeks are kind of what turbocharges things and we send you out hopefully like a rocket ship out the other side. But then it's like staying engaged because who knows what opportunities are going to present themselves over the next couple of years. We want people to stay looped in on that stuff. So anyway, I've been doing the one-on-one calls. It's kind of an incentive like, hey, get on a one-on-one call with me. It'll be cheaper. But selfishly, it's a really good way to make sure that we have like an unbelievable group. And so, hey, this is awesome for you. Like you should do it. And then it's kind of like selecting those people. And so there's up anyone who's interested with that for sure.
And then Kenny, I'm sorry, I totally forgot to ask you, but can you tell the listeners how much this course costs?
The full price is $1,499, so just below $1,500. And then with the discount that we're doing for the one-on-one calls, that brings it down just below $1,000. So it's like $975.
Yeah, it's pretty good, especially for having been through it and also having taught it for several years at this point. It's an incredible amount of value, like you've stressed a lot, but the community and the network that you become part of once you go into it. And yeah, and Kenny, how are you talking? If people are interested, how can they learn more? How can they reach out or interview for the course?
Yeah. And one thing I will say about the price, which we collect data on everything. And so one of the things is, given what you know now, the program is, and the answer is it's multiple choice. It's like very underpriced, all the way up to like very overpriced. Last time around, we got 98% either said fairly priced, underpriced, or very underpriced. One person out of 100 said slightly overpriced. And so I was like, damn it, like 100% would have been cool. And so that's our goal. So much of what we do is completely free, from the newsletter to the podcast, to the YouTube channel, to the webinars. It's not 80% of what we do is for free. If we charge for something, we take that really seriously. If someone walks away being like, my ROI was 300%, that should be higher. We want it to be 500%, and like ideally it's, we change the course of someone's entire career. One of our end goals is people walk away with a bunch of new friends. They learn a ton. Very measurable goal is that someone's working a job that they don't love in an industry that they're not passionate about. And then on the other side of it, they now have a job that they love in an industry that they're passionate about. They're excited to basically go to work every day. Oh, and they're getting paid more, and they have equity upside, and they have a bunch of new friends who they actually work with on a daily basis. That's the outcome that we're kind of shooting for. So figured I'd add that in.
No, that was great. I think the last question I have for you is, for those who are listening to this for their 16 to 20-year-olds, there will be a lot of interest about whether or not their children should go through this program. And I'm going to do a little aside here and say, if your child is interested in learning about financial technology, Bitcoin, cryptocurrency, anything like that, and you don't know anything about it, and you're wondering how do you start them off before they get to their skill stack like Solidity, React, Angular, all that stuff, before they get into what the coding languages they need to know, this is a very good entry point. And then Kenny, I'll let you make your recommendation as far as who would be a good fit for this or who might get a lot out of this.
For anybody with a kid in that, let's say 15, kind of freshman in high school on the lower end, all the way through like college age, one of the coolest things we've seen throughout this program is this culture of pay it forward. And you've been a huge part of that. Of once you've had some success and you were someone who didn't quite have it figured out, and then you were able to figure it out, you want to help people do the same thing. And so there's this big culture of that. With young people, they have this unnatural advantage that they should all take as much advantage of as possible. I know I did into my career. When I'm talking to young people, I'm 30 now. So I'm not like old, but I'm not young enough where people are just going to do nice things for me because like a smart, ambitious young kid. And so when I was, there was always wanted to do stuff for me and it made no sense to me. And I'm like, what's this person's deal? Why would they do something nice for me? I can't do anything for them in return. And now they're a good person. It's like now, anytime that I see someone who's really smart, young, ambitious, I'll go way out of my way for them in a way I would never for just like someone my age or older.
Well, because the return is often larger because the freest years of their life right ahead of them. And if they use those years wisely, unlike me and unlike it sounds like you, then they can get massive, massive, massive return.
Yeah. One of the cool things that we've seen is a lot of folks who go through the program, I would say they're focused now on the second half or the final quarter of their careers, where they've been very successful. They have freedom of like, I've made my money type of thing. Now I want to do the thing that I care about. If you fit into that category, this thing is perfect for you. Like some of our best outcomes have come from those people, but you have a lot of those people. So you might have someone who is like a C-level executive in the tech world, and now they're ready for the final phase of their career. These people love mentoring young people. We've had some of the coolest mentor-mentee relationships that, because it happens naturally and it's not forced, they've been amazing. And that's something I would say, if you have a kid in that age and you want them to just start to learn how to hold their own in these types of relationships and in these types of conversations, it's been one of the most valuable things we've ever seen. The youngest person we ever had go through the program was this 12-year-old guy. We've had like a 13, a 14. And I follow along. This one guy I'm thinking of in particular, I think he's 15 now. He has started his own company, crazy stuff, but they've had a ton of help from the older people in the program who've just kind of taken them under their wing. We've seen a lot of that. Basically, what I would summarize is, and I think this is a term that you taught me, you or Ryan, is like key customer. Who's the best person that goes through this? And that thinking of things in those terms has really helped us. And there's really two. The first is someone who they're, let's say, 5 on the low side to like 30 on the high side years into their career. And they have a very good idea of what they're already really good at, and they've been very successful. So they're in the top 5, 10, 15, 20% in the world at what they do. And they find crypto and Bitcoin interesting, but they don't know exactly what to do next. Those are some of our favorite people to work with because they're going to be successful, and we just get to help them along in the process. And then the second is someone who is brand new. So whether you're a really young person or if you're someone you're like, I barely just heard of Bitcoin and crypto yesterday, to the extent that I have heard it, it's been in the context of like FTX and craziness going on in the industry. But I want to work on the cutting edge. And I do sense that people in this industry are really passionate about it. If you think of it in like the Pareto distribution, and you want that 20% of really well thought out, reliable information that'll get you maybe 80% of the way to figuring out, is this where I want to spend more time? Those people do really well too. Sometimes people fall into both of those categories, but that's kind of the way that we think of it, at least.
When you say that, I can picture people that I've coached, and that is pretty much the breakdown. When I picture the gallery, I'm like, yeah, no, that's about right. That's about everybody. Well, cool. Kenny, it's been really awesome to have you on. And then I guess the last thing is, can you tell us, give people links to sign up or how they can contact you, how they can apply, all that good stuff. And then we'll let you get back to building.
And that's the coolest thing is like on the days where I have a lot of these calls where I'm chatting with people who are either at least a couple of days of chats with alumni of like, hey, this is where I'm at. This is where I'm stuck. This is where I can use help. And those are my favorite. But then I also love chatting with people who are trying to figure out whether or not they should go through the program. And kind of what I joke is it makes us not have to do real work. The other part of my day is blocked out for like making the program better. Oh my God, there's this new protocol that's now been built on top of Bitcoin and it's changing everything. Well, now we need to incorporate that into our curriculum. Like, how do we do that? And it's like really hard work. The more conversations I can have, I'm still being productive, but they're actually fun. If anyone wants to book a call with me for that reason, more than welcome. Just help me procrastinate. What I'd say is thecryptoacademy.io is the best place to figure out a little bit more information about the program. We didn't even get to success stories. There's a ton of them on there. We have a lot of really, really cool and unique stories of people who've kind of done what they set out to do. So that's the first place I would go. If you want to set up a call with me, that's just schedule a call with Kenny. And it's really easy. You can just grab time directly on my calendar. I'd encourage you to do that. And then if you want to just connect with me on Twitter, Kenny D21N. So that's a little Easter egg, 21 million Bitcoin. That's all the Bitcoin that'll ever exist. And so that's why that's there in my name. Connect with me on Twitter. I'm always keeping an eye on my DMs. But I think those are the best 3 places to send people. And then I'll make sure that you have those links just in case anyone wants, you want to put them in the bio or anything like that.
if anyone needs to. So definitely contact Kenny. If you make your way accidentally to our inbox instead of Kenny's, we'll forward you right on over to him also.
Cool. Yeah. And the good news is if you decide to go through the program, you get to spend a bunch more time with Hannah. Her sessions are amazing.
We do have fun. It's a good time.
Oh, I forgot to show you. Check out this cup I got before we wrap. Terry Black's barbecue.
Whoa, check it out. Folks, for those of you that don't know, Ryan and I live outside of Houston and we've taken a few day trips to Austin. So the DeGiglio, I'm sorry. I know I always say your name
It's
like
close.
that. I don't know why.
DeGiglio. It's pretty close. Yeah,
DeGiglio.
most people say DeGiglio, which is more wrong
Much
than what
worse.
you said. So yeah, I got my Terry Black's cup, which is, it's a really good cup. It's sturdy, right? And it's big. I remember last time we chatted, I'm like, I got to show Hannah my Terry Black's cup next time we chat. So
we're going to have it, folks. Ryan owes Kenny a call to talk to him about something, and I'll have Ryan get his Terry Black's cup because the Mariama house also has a Terry Black's cup that's around at all times.
All right. Well, Hannah, this was amazing. I hope your listeners find it valuable, and I look forward to chatting with some of them. But thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.